Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric. I'm here with Michael, and we have a double feature that's been a couple of years in the works.
Yeah, really.
Now that I'm still adjusting to the triple digits here. This is what, 104 or something, right?
103, I
We have
think.
done a lot of shows.
Next week would be 104 because that's our final year-ender.
Yeah, can we just tease that right now?
Oh yeah, we're gonna bring it hardcore with Faster Pussycat Kill Kill and Mean Girls.
But that is not the show today.
No.
Today we have some book films, and definitely films about bottoming out.
Bottoming
so
the fuck out.
Yeah, what are the films?
Confessions of a Dangerous Mind and Fight Club.
We're going to spoil both of those. They're based on books, so by definition, they're spoilable.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't read the books, you can do so at bookshow.doublefeatureshow.com for free. Or better yet, watch the movies, because books are never as good as the movies.
That's
ever.
just a fact
I mean,
of life.
just give me a case where that's ever been true.
Bible.
Charlton Heston would be proud. The hate mail is pouring in already for this show. So we are going to spoil the films. If you haven't seen Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, use the chapters and skip right on over to Fight Club, which I believe everybody and their mother has seen.
Yeah.
Fight Club is almost more of a joke about spoiling than that Bruce Willis film used to make fun of all the
Right.
time. I mean, it's at
Die
that
Hard.
level of popularity. I don't think that was the one.
Oh,
It's by
yeah.
that director who's out of work now and no one will ever hire him again.
Airbender.
So anyways, use some chapters and that's all well and good. Confessions of a Dangerous Mind is based on a book. Who wrote the book and what is that?
Well, Chuck Barris wrote the book. It's an
Uh-huh.
unauthorized autobiography of Chuck Barris.
Sure.
But before we get into Chuck Barris,
Yeah.
we should let's touch on the storytellers of the film instead of the storytellers of the story.
I like that approach. I'm all right with that.
All right, so this is the second film we've covered that's directed by George Clooney.
Yeah, we also did Good Night and Good Luck back about a year ago, or probably a little bit more than that, which was another excellent film if you haven't seen that.
I love George Clooney directing. Everything's dark, everything's sleek. It's like you're just watching George Clooney as a person, but
Yeah.
telling a story.
Yeah,
it's really sleek and suave, and you love it, and it's hip.
You don't see that a whole lot where actors go on to make excellent films. A lot of actors direct films, and most people don't know about them because they're fucking terrible. But they say that about directing, that you have to know what to do with your actors. We've talked before on this show about the auteur theory and the idea of looking at the director as the puppet master. So, actors, of course, will look at films from the actor's perspective about how great the actors are and their performances. I think typically on this show, we usually look at films and go, all right, actors are a piece. They're like a camera or a
Lighting rig.
fake tree prop, They're a gaffing rig. And so they're just another thing to be used in making the film. But of course, they're human beings. So you don't
can't
have
kill them.
Well, beyond that, you don't have the quality control where a lighting rig is everybody
have to
knows
feed it.
exactly. You don't have to feed it. It doesn't cost any money. Do you know what I'm getting at here, though?
Yeah, no, I understand.
Well, my point is that sometimes
They
they're good, sometimes they're
affect the film,
bad, and
yeah.
you have to get good performances
Sure.
out of them.
And George Clooney's good at that. I mean, that's his A game, right?
Yeah.
He's an actor firsthand.
Yeah.
That's what he's been doing since forever ago, since Roseanne, since fucking Revenge of the Killer Tomatoes.
Uh-huh.
And now he's bringing the big guns as a director in a Charlie Kaufman
Right.
screenplay, that's no laughing matter either.
No. Talking about George Clooney directing actors is one thing, but that's not even some of my favorite components of this. In fact, I think some of what I like about George Clooney's direction is that he has a lot of really great ideas, just as a director, totally separate from the actors.
Right.
He could do a film without actors that I think would still be visionary and fantastic. But when we talk about the actors, though, some of their performances in here are really great.
Oh, absolutely.
Sam Rockwell, for
Sam
starters.
Rockwell he plays Chuck Barris lead role, and he's carrying the whole film. He has no flaws as the character of Chuck Barris, and every line is delivered perfectly.
As far as we can tell, this is a perfect performance.
Yeah, I would
mean,
say
he's pretty
so.
great.
And George Clooney is also the CIA handler for Chuck Barris, and then we have Julia Roberts, Rutger Hauer, Drew Barrymore is also in this film. Maggie Gyllenhaal has a really weird
Small
short
part, yeah.
cameo in which Sam Rockwell fucks her, and she doesn't really care that much.
It's always weird seeing, there's a couple different films that feature George Clooney as a CIA operative. Most recently, The Men Who Stare at Goats. I mean, kind of has tie-ins to that. I never really believed that he's a CIA operative, But I mean, he always does such a bang up job that I'll totally buy it. But when I hear he's a CIA operative and he always has the fucking mustache when he does it, he always has the mustache. And I look at him and I'm like, are you serious? Are you really doing this? And by the end of the film, I forgot that that was George Clooney. So I think just as much of an amazing job here. And it's hard to act in front of a camera and then also wrangle the entire film. Well, that too. But, you know, that part might be easier because I think actors kind of know in a performance, what the fuck do I know about acting? But from what I know about cinema, it appears that a lot of times an actor, when you're in that zone, when you hit that great take, you kind of know that you did it. I think it's the same as musicians. You kind of know if you just hit that sweet spot and that was the take you're going to use.
Right.
I don't know if actually being in your film when you're directing is easier, but it's something that actors who direct can't really seem to resist.
Mm-hmm.
So originally, this was going to be directed by Bryan Singer, which I think would have made it a much different movie.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I'm sure Bryan would have done a fine job.
It would have been an alright film anyway.
Well, yeah. He's made some great films and some bad films. The thing I love the most about George Clooney's work is this film is just littered with essentially special effects.
Yeah.
I mean, practical, amazing effects. The film escapes me, but there was a particular film we talked about on the show where I thought it was just as much praising magic in an illusion as part of the special effects, as the way they accomplished the shots. These shots are, the most noticeable one right away is the phone conversation, where he's having that first conversation with Goldberg about picking his show up, and to see what would normally be a split screen conversation, you know, when you're talking to somebody on the phone.
Or switching back and forth.
Right. Or using the John Waters technique from Polyester with putting the boxes on the frame. Here the sets are the same set. You know, they're overlapping sets. So you have Sam Rockwell on the left-hand side, and you have the character of Goldberg on the right-hand side, and you can move the camera in such a way where you're looking at both sets, they're overlapping, they're clearly on the same stage, which works even more because of the whole TV theme, the whole theme of television. It would be an excellent technique just for no reason, but Clooney is bringing the techniques that make sense within the themes of the story, which just makes them even fucking cooler. You know, to put up a thing in post where you split the screen and you see both people talking, yeah, that's all right, but having the idea of putting them both on the same stage in that same moment is just a whole nother level of something interesting, you know, for people to look at, and something more, like I said, to feed into your theme. I said the film was littered with them, but I really do mean that. It's almost everywhere. Scene where you get, you know, the scene they use in the DVD menus is just set up really, really nicely, where you don't actually see who Sam Rockwell is talking to. There are just a ton of them, and they're all practical. They're all sleight of hand. I don't even know if there's anything really computer generated.
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. You know, probably this and that, but even that Bleach fucking shit that you like. Yeah. There's
well, and that's weird because that's another inadvertent theme between the two movies. But they use bleach bypass on here, or bleach skip. Sometimes it's called silver retention, where it's a way of developing the film without using a certain chemical, and it really makes it very, very dark. But they also do that for some selective color stuff in the film. It's weird. It's almost black and white, but only on certain color tones and levels. You have, I noticed during a scene that had a yellow car.
Right. It's the scene where Rutger Hauer, I think his name's Keeler, is killing him, and Chuck Barris is taking the snapshot.
Yeah, right. It's a completely black and white shot with the exception of the car and the characters' faces. They're just taking certain colors and pulling the saturation all the way down to the point where they're black and white. But the film's not black and white. Right. The other colors on the palette are completely saturated and vibrant. Really, they look great.
And that's a practical effect. That's not that. Even that isn't digital.
Yeah, it's funny too because the movie's produced by Soderbergh, who's been a big champion of digital film. You know, he's shot almost exclusively on digital for a while now, and it's how he gets so many independent pictures done so cheaply. You know, he's really a master of that. Here, I'm pretty sure they're using physical film. I want to say it's 35 millimeter, at least in most of the film. So all of these techniques are in film development. They're not even really in post-production, in digital editing. They're the kind of thing that you plan for on the set. You manipulate your exposures in the camera, and you select the effect basically when you're developing the film. A lot of analog stuff, a lot of really hands-on stuff. But I like that sleight of hand effect of manipulating scenes on the set. You know, I saw Teller of Penn and Teller talking about that recently in an Old Spice commercial. actually, that does a lot of things where the scenes kind of change. If you want to look it up, just look up, I'm sure you can Google, Teller Old Spice, and this will probably come up. He said something about it on Twitter or whatever, but he was talking about how films now use a lot of CG, and it sort of takes the cunning out of it, really. The reason I like this is because it's so showing off.
It's have to George Clooney. It's very
George
Clooney.
It really is. He was sitting there with incredible ideas, or he sat there hunched over a pallet of paper, just coming up with how are we going to move these different components in these different ways to pull this off. And I have a great appreciation for the brilliance of coming up with those ideas. It's just really very much showing off. It's not, well, we'll film this now, and in post, we can apply some kind of gimmick or
we'll
do
fade
something.
It to black.
We'll fade it to black every time. It's right there. It's on the set. It's in front of you. It's tangible, and it is an illusion. That's at the end of the day. That's what it is.
And like you said, it's perfect for the TV thing. It's perfect because the film is about Chuck Barris, the man, not Chuck Barris, the spy.
Yeah.
It just kind of, it's like, as we said, it's an autobiography that Chuck Barris, put together himself, unauthorized somehow. I'm not sure how one unauthorizes their own autobiography. Probably because the government wouldn't have wanted him to do it. Regardless, Chuck Barris, okay, so let's take a look at Chuck Barris the man, not Chuck Barris the Sam Rockwell.
Right.
Chuck Barris was this guy who, in the 60s, came up with a bunch of game shows, like the Dating Game. They cover it in the film. Yeah. Dating Game. The big ones are the Dating Game, the Newlywed Game, the Gong Show, a couple other ones. Everybody's seen the Dating Game. Everybody's seen the Newlywed Game. The Gong Show is kind of a weirder one.
Right, but one that they really use a lot in the film.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Gong Show is probably the most brilliant idea he had.
Probably because it's the darkest. I think it fits the tone of the rest of the story, especially when he's starting to lose it.
Well, it's a huge statement on his life. It's this setup where essentially people come in and a bunch of judges decide whether they're good enough to have other people pay attention to them.
Yeah.
They come in and they, dance around and make idiots of themselves.
Sure.
And if they're entertaining enough, they get to make an asshole of themselves till the end of their asshole routine.
Right.
If they're not an asshole enough, then they get made an asshole of by somebody hitting a fucking gong and
something that still works in television today.
Absolutely.
Really, a premise that he came up with and a show that was successful and something that's lived on in television for 50 years now. That's not the only thing the Gong Show is notable for.
Yeah, that's true. There's been a lot of artists, notably, the most notably, I may say, dare I. I don't know if you're familiar. There's this composer. He does music for everything. His name's Danny Elfman.
Yeah, I believe this is the Oingo Boingo podcast.
Yeah.
We've covered Oingo Boingo several times on the show. Nightmare Before Christmas is probably the last time we really talked about it.
So Danny Elfman's Oingo Boingo, which is his band from the 80s, when the Gong Show was running in the 70s, Oingo Boingo went on there as a group called the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo.
That's fantastic.
And it was just like a huge 11-piece act of people, and they put on a circus show and played weird music. And they came back to the Gong Show a few times, but that's where the band really got their start from, was they were assholes on the Gong Show.
So not to move away from George Clooney too much, but I'm interested in the Charlie Kaufman aspect.
Right.
You're just as familiar with Charlie Kaufman's writing as I am. What else have we seen?
Well, the big film he was all notable for was Adaptation, because he puts himself in the film.
Sure. Also funny because they gave the award to the character and the character's brother, who is not actually a real person.
He did Eternal Sunshine. All of his films are really notable for kind of whimsy and this general disconnect from reality that doesn't quite separate itself too far for you to have to really suspend your disbelief.
Right.
And that's this film in a nutshell.
Yeah.
You have Chuck Barris, who claims that the FBI comes in and tells him that he's a spy. But come on. The government decides that he fits the profile to be a spy.
Sure.
How anybody can honestly believe him is really, I'm at a loss.
He strangled a fetus when in utero, so that's clearly why.
Exactly. So all these people that they interview throughout the film say that, he's got a lot of mixed up things and he could be that weird type of guy. And he clearly believes this. The unauthorized autobiography states very plainly that he was a spy for the government.
Sure.
And fortunately for him, and unfortunately for anybody who gives a shit, being a secret government operative that's an independent contract killer, there's no evidence. Especially when in your book, everybody you're affiliated with is killed.
Right.
He's managed to assuming that he's making it up, he's managed to create a flawless, airtight story where nobody can prove whether or not he's telling the truth.
It's kind of the catch-22 of being in the CIA. A lot of these CIA books are coming out recently, but they're from people who clearly have established credentials. It's become a real pop sensation to have a book, written once you left the CIA. But what we're dealing with here is almost something that reminds me of Philip K. Dick.
Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit on A Scanner Darkly when we did that show. Of these ideas Philip K. Dick had about the government following him. They had a file on him. The FBI was like wiretapping his phones. And we don't really know if that's the case. It kind of looks like that's totally not the case. And that he's just completely delusional. Here the line's blurred even more. I mean, everybody can kind of snicker at the Philip K. Dick thing and go, yeah, the guy took a lot of drugs. He was probably delusional. Right. Sam Rockwell's character might have had a drinking problem, but definitely just had a sleeping problem. Right. Which is also another feature of today's show, Insomnia.
I think the biggest evidence that we actually have to prove or disprove this is the dating game. Apparently, this is where he was getting all his vacations to go kill people.
Yeah.
And it is a fact that people in the dating game would end up going places like Bosnia.
Sure.
Places like West Berlin.
Right.
Places where two young 20-somethings wouldn't have a good time.
Yeah.
And there'd be a chaperone, and he would go. That is true. In the book, it would say that he would go off and kill people in these odd locations.
Right.
But what is still a questionable thing is why would West Berlin ever be a locale to send two young people unless there was a government murder going on?
Sure, well, and that's part of what's going on in the CIA. And I've been following a little bit of that stuff lately because we have a secret war going on in the CIA, which the government hasn't, officially declared as a war, but we're fighting it with these predator drones, and it's some really nasty, awful shit that is well out of the scope of this episode of the show. But the communication within the CIA doesn't work directly with the other branches of the government. So senators don't know what's happening in the CIA. The president, I'm sure the president maybe know. I don't know anything about the political structure and what really goes on there. But you find things that come out, that leak from the CIA or that come out in these books all the time, where you then turn to the rest of political Washington and go, didn't you guys know about that? And they were like, that's the CIA. We don't talk to them. That's secret stuff. That's the last real secret spy shit of the American government. We don't know what's happening in there. So we may just never know if this stuff was really happening, and we may just have to stand back and kind of laugh at that. To think about the Charlie Kaufman stuff, you're talking about kind of the whimsy of a lot of that. He's also worked hand in hand with Michel Gondry on a bunch of stuff. And Michel Gondry is a director who has done, they're basically dream films. Yeah. A lot of his stuff, when you look at something like The Science of Sleep, which really is a film about dreams, or Eternal Sunshine, which has a lot of really surreal stuff.
Well, and Be Kind, Rewind, it's just...
Sure, yeah. It's a brilliantly written premise in that it basically gives him an excuse to just put his music videos,
right,
and film, to have these two guys just go out and film all sorts of crazy shit. But those films are about celebrating that same kind of craft. When Clooney's doing this stuff, it's a lot different than what Michel Gondry's doing, but it's still about the same sort of tricks. What Clooney does is take a lot of really old gags or things that have been done before and innovate them in a really cool way. Someone who's really familiar with film, one of our favorite VCR directors, or an actor who's been in a lot of films, probably has the creativity to do because they've seen these same... I'm thinking specifically of the Vertigo shot. There's a scene where Sam Rockwell's character is speaking to Julia Roberts' character, and there's a Vertigo shot of the two of them just talking. Usually a Vertigo shot is used, we've covered it extensively on the show, I don't need to explain what it is, just Google it. But it's used to show that a character...
it's used to illustrate a character within his or her surroundings, whether they are growing around him or shrinking around him. It's just kind of, it shows
it's usually
the
when their gut is dropping out.
Exactly.
Something bad just happened.
It shows the perspective of gravity. In a scene.
Or to speak about gravity, I've also seen it used really well. I want to say it was in the opening episode of Firefly, but I haven't seen that in a while, where they, go into warp speed or something and they use the vertigo on the ship. I've seen it used in a lot of interesting ways. Here, Drew Barrymore's character
Penny,
walks into the vertigo shot, which I've never seen done. I think it's really cool.
Because you see Sam Rockwell, you see Chuck Barris walk and get basically ambushed by Julia Roberts.
Yeah.
He has no idea she's there.
No.
And you see the restaurant, and he's kind of off to the side, but the restaurant is still going on behind them. And then Penny walks in, and the scene just sucks in, and it's these three people now. It's no longer the restaurant. It's an awkward situation where one girl calls a man strawberry dick, and then his girlfriend wants to know, what's that mean?
It's also great because it's doing something new, but it's still accomplishing his gut dropping out.
Right.
We know that she's going to walk into this conflict, and it prolongs her walk into the conflict because she just keeps getting further away, and eventually she's going to come right up to the camera. It's great. I really like it. One more interesting thing George Clooney did was give different kind of camera styles to the different eras in his life, specifically the different decades between the 60s and the 70s. You get a lot of the washed out colors in the beginning of the film, which are almost jarring until you see them up against the different styles he's using that are more crisp or more some of that selective color stuff we talked about. But it mimics television and the Technicolor stuff, and it prepares you mentally to be looking at an environment. It sets the mood, really, for a lot of that overlit early 60s terrible makeup television stuff. I'm a big fan of the digital process myself because you can still do a lot of those tricks, but that you retain a lot of the detail. And a lot of times when you do something like they do in this film organically with the different chemicals, it washes out a lot of the detail, which is unfortunate. But nevertheless, still really cool visual styles to differentiate each decade and each sort of epoch of his life, if you will. So talk to me about this mole.
All right, so one of the cooler aspects of the film, and what winds it up down all the way around in a circle left and right.
How many winding? What's winding here?
What winds it down to the end is George Clooney's character shows up to Chuck Barris and tells him that there's a mole in the organization.
That, I love when there's a mole.
That
me and Kiefer Sutherland love our moles. Sorry, go on.
Agents are dropping like flies, and Chuck Barris needs to stay the hell out of Dodge.
Sure.
Essentially, everybody that Chuck Barris has been involved with ends up dying.
Yeah.
George Clooney's character ends up dying.
Picking them off one by one.
Keely's dead. That British motherfucker in the back of the limo gets blown away. And then there's a rundown. I mean, who else is left? And the answer is Julia Roberts, which brings me to a very hearty question and also brings me to the end of the film. There's this really interesting thing they keep going back to throughout the film, which is naked Sam Rockwell with a beard watching TV.
Yeah, they do.
So this is chronologically one step before he goes to confront the mole. He shaves himself clean, and over this, there's a voiceover of him writing a letter to Penny saying that she's the greatest thing that ever happened to him.
Right.
And then he walks out the door, and presumably, that's where he's going. He's going to see Penny because he's going to reclaim his lost love life with his newly shaven beard.
Right, but that's not where he ends up.
In fact, that is not where he ends up, Eric. He ends up at the door of who we know to be the mole.
Yeah.
The question is, did he walk out the door with the intention of taking out the mole, or did he go see her and find himself in a situation knee-deep in death?
Well, first of all, it's interesting because the mechanic of the mole plot device is usually that you're trying to figure out who the mole is, and it's a big double-cross thing, and there's something about that I just really love in film, but everybody knows she's the mole. I mean, we all know it because everybody else is dead, first of all. But secondly, there aren't a lot of characters in here. So unless they're going to pull some weird twisty thing where someone, and it's kind of, it's supposed to be a true story, sort of. It's based on the book.
Right.
So unless the author is completely insane, which he is, but that's beyond the point, it's got to be somebody who would kind of make sense.
Right.
So there's this other spy who sort of shows up every once in a while. She's the mole. We all know she's the mole. The question is, does he know she's the mole when he shows up? So this is kind of an interesting point you bring up. He does write this letter to Penny beforehand. So the movie plays out as if he has no idea. He just showed up there, and eventually he gets the upper hand. And it's scene you described, which I kind of missed the minutia of, but where
they spin the tea tray. Yeah, there's this really interesting scene where she poisons one of the teas and then marks it with a sugar cube.
Yeah.
Brings it out on a tray and places it in front of him, and he, obviously at this point already knowing that there's poison, or at least suspecting, instead of switching the tray around as I would have done, as you probably would have done.
I would just drink the tea. I have too much faith in humanity.
But instead, he rotates the centerpiece and replaces the sugar cube onto the other cup, which makes her think that he spun it, and then she ends up spinning it and killing herself.
Well, so he has to know when he shows up. I think it's clever because it's almost a plot twist because you think maybe he died. And then you get that great scene of her falling in the hallway. And
he's standing in the doorway.
Yeah, he's standing there. But when you think about it, having seen the film, when you go back and watch that scene again, he wrote a note to Penny, and then he went and saw Julia Roberts' character and got the best. I mean, he knew. He flipped the tray. He knew what was going on. But that comes back to that great level of, did that even actually happen, or is he just trying to make himself look really fucking smart in his book?
You can never tell with these people. All right, we're going to give Confessions of a Dangerous Mind a gong, and we're going to move on to Fight...
Gong.
Oh, sorry.
So we move on to Fight Club, and I have to set up our conversation a little bit here. Usually we can jump into these things, but not so much this time.
Oh, deep water.
As something... Bad blood here is really what's going on. So Fight Club is a movie that, among a lot of other things, is about insomnia, it's about bottoming out, and I have to say it's a really personal film for me. It's something that it was one of the first artistic films I've ever seen. The first thing that was beyond popcorn time wasting value.
Senseless.
And I also had long-standing problems with both insomnia and masochism. So I don't know, just for some reason the movie, I guess for very particular reasons, the movie spoke to me. And it also included or maybe forced upon me a lot of the things I like artistically in visual style, camera work, things of that nature. I don't know if I like those things because I saw Fight Club a million times when I was younger, or if I, liked those things in art and then saw Fight Club. You, on the other hand, you tend to look at movies more from a storyline aspect because you don't do all the bullshit photo stuff that I do in my spare time. So I have this inability to look at plot elements of Fight Club. So right away, I think we should just get this out there. Yeah. The twist drives you insane in Fight Club.
So we've already discussed, at least partially on the show, that the multiple personality bullshit drives me nuts.
Yeah.
But in Fight Club, it drives me so much crazier.
Sure.
Fight Club does it so much worse than all these other films.
So you're not even saying this is a matter of, did it do it first? Does it have the right? Because it did after Fight Club hit its success, which really it hit on DVD as a cult film, which we cover so frequently, more so than in theaters. But after that picked up, so many films started using it, and it became so played out, and you always feel cheated at the end. I didn't, because I saw Fight Club before I saw all these other films. But when you get to the part where the guys are the same person, you're just mad.
Yep.
So what is it about the particular delivery that, because I think I actually know exactly what you're going to say, that bothers you about how they reveal this?
It bothers me because it's supposed to be such a huge fucking deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they go through such painful lengths to make you go, oh shit.
Yeah.
And it drives me insane. He keeps delivering one-liners every time something hits him, like a pang of consciousness, and then a bullshit one-liner about an airplane.
Chuck style. Can we whine about that a little bit too?
It's a pang of consciousness, and then here's a one-liner about an airplane. Another realization, another one-liner.
You can tell, and I can look at this even without being really objective, because like I said, it's a really personal film for me. They're so proud of themselves when they give I mean, they think they've pulled one over on the audience, and maybe rightfully so. I think a lot of people are fooled by this, and we'll talk about some of the ways they try and distract you from figuring out before it happens. But this was one of those late 90s twist kind of films, and when they hit you with the twist, it is like Kaiser fucking Soze opens up in there. Oh, now I get it. This happened. Turn over here, this happened. Let's show it on the CCTV, the fucking security cameras. We'll go back and reveal this. We'll show that they're really, really proud of what they've done.
It's this disgusting lowest common denominator bullshit where they're feeding the audience.
Right.
Literally hand feeding the audience their fucking Gerber applesauce.
I would argue that perhaps at the time and place, you needed to hand feed an audience that because it was kind of a new thing. I don't know if I can really defend that because there's no way for me to go back to 1999 and really experience the culture of film at that point.
I'm going to argue that a film that gains most of its popularity on DVD should be subtle because it has rewatchability factor.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, if you're holding the film in your hand we've talked about this before. If something happens at the end and you go, "What the fuck?"
Right.
You should want to rewatch it
right away.
You
should watch it again.
That's what instead of the film going, yeah, I know. Here's what we meant. Here's what's going on.
Right.
And the whole film, and aside from the twist, the film has lowest common denominator written all over it. It's just really basic, very, this is cool. People will like dudes fighting each other.
Yeah.
Let's show a naked chick. Let's talk about sex and dicks. This guy's got bitch tits, soap.
I totally hear what you're saying with that. And that's something that drives me nuts, not about the film, but about the fans. I do think a movie like that should be subtle, and I think the thing that drives away that subtlety is the fact that Edward Norton basically turns to the camera and goes, "Whoa, I did not see that coming."
Exactly.
And that's a little crazy. And maybe the argument can be made that they need to really hammer that in for you to understand what goes on towards the ending, because after that's revealed, there are so many scenarios that rely on you really believing that they're the same person. The first time I saw it, I was like, they're not really the same person. And then you have to actually see the footage of him beating himself up to kind of go, oh, all right. Because if you're not connecting the pieces, by the time you go to the end, you get to the ending, you're like, what the fuck just happened? Which arguably, maybe that's how you should feel. But to get back to what you're saying about the movie being based, this is a criticism I have, not of the film, because I think for me, anyways, this falls into the category of near perfect film. It's in one of my like top 3 or top 5 films. Really like it. But I can't talk to anybody about it.
Yeah.
Which saddens me that you have these qualms with the film, because it's so difficult to have a conversation with just a random person on the street about Fight Club, especially now that it's been 10 years.
Because you say, oh, have you seen Fight Club? And they're like, rule number 1, man.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That any other show you listen to on the internet is going to make jokes about the rules. Anytime you see a Fight Club article anywhere, somebody talking about it, the comments section is riddled with jokes about rules and guys fighting.
And bitch tits.
And bitch tits. And there's so much more to this film, at the very least aesthetically, that doesn't get picked up. It's kind of like, we haven't covered it on the show. Maybe we'll get to it someday, but I have the same problem with Donnie Darko, where there's a lot of cool sci-fi shit going on in that movie, where people are like, yeah, talking bunny rabbit, that Jake Gyllenhaal guy. Just like, come on. Did no one get this? No one got the memo? It drives me nuts.
Granted, Chuck Palahniuk feels the same way you do about that.
Yeah, right, but we don't feel the same way about him,
well,
unfortunately.
Not at all. Chuck Palahniuk thinks he's a good writer. I think he's really good at whining.
I will get into my love of Fight Club at some point, but you've hit another point that I believe in so wholeheartedly.
Well, okay, so let's just do it. Let's just do it the way we used to do the rundown. We'll kind of knock the stuff we don't like.
Okay.
And then we'll celebrate the film toward the end.
Sure, all right.
All right, so the second, and probably the only other thing that I really don't like about the film is Chuck Palahniuk himself.
Yeah.
One thing I do agree with him about is that I wish this film wasn't as popular.
Sure.
But the one thing I don't like about Chuck Palahniuk is he's so well known. I mean, it's the Diablo Cody thing that drives me up the wall. He's so well known for being so painfully hip.
Yeah.
And he's got his thumb on the pulse of society,
Sure,
like Chuck
sure.
Barris, right?
Yeah.
He knows what people want to read.
Yeah.
And it's just this bullshit whining, I'm addicted to sex, I got my sphincter stuck in the bottom of a pool.
Right.
Bullshit like that, and people go, dude, this guy's a visionary.
Well, even to look at his other film, did you ever end up seeing Choke?
Yeah.
Choke, it's weird because it's Sam Rockwell, and I think he's still delivering maybe a good performance.
He's doing his
know.
best.
He's trying.
With the
He's
material.
trying, yeah. Although it's hard to look at Choke and not go, wow, they were trying to do another Fight Club. But just to tackle the novel of Fight Club, I can go along with all the philosophy because I like a lot of that stuff. And it's stuff we've talked about on the show about your life could end at any moment and, living the fullest of that. And I also really enjoy the rock bottom stuff that we'll get to in a goddamn second, I promise. But that book ends in a really washy, pretentious, religious, ambiguous way. And I can't. Well, one thing I don't like is a super ambiguous ending for the purpose that feels like, please create your own ending. I love ambiguity in film and in art and in literature, but I don't like when you don't like
really The Sopranos. Oops, spoiler.
Yeah, exactly. And they end the book in this way where you don't know if he's in a mental asylum or heaven, and so that doesn't set right with me at all. I much prefer the ending where Edward Norton shoots himself in the fucking skull and somehow is alive.
To watch the buildings fall down.
Yeah, because if you want to go, well, what the fuck? And then the buildings fall, so you don't even care that he just shot himself in the head.
This is something that I didn't remember from watching this film, is this last scene where it's Edward Norton saying everything's going to be fine, and then the buildings come down.
Right.
And okay, so let's halt it there and pretend for a moment that that's how the film ends.
Yeah.
But that's not really how the film ends. So this is what goes on. The buildings are falling down and there's this really graphic scene of explosions. I would not be impressed by this. However, the choice of music for this scene is one
Pixies,
of the
man.
most brilliant decisions, because it's Where Is My Mind by the Pixies, which is the most lollygagging, carefree tune that anyone has really written in the past 20 years.
And subtlety the book lacked.
Yeah, exactly. Since fucking If I Had a Hammer from Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, that tune.
Yeah, very subtle.
It just doesn't mean anything. The song is so simple, and these buildings are falling down, and everything feels okay.
Right.
He's got a hole in the back of his head. He's with this nutcase of a chick.
Yeah.
They're smoking on top of a building.
Yeah, well, his skull is
He's
smoking.
failed. He has fucking failed.
Yeah.
These buildings are falling down, and everything's okay because Where Is My Mind?
Yep.
Love it.
All from a music cue, and debatably could still have that. If you want to take Where Is My Mind literally, can still have a cop out.
It's all over the wall
ending.
on the back,
Yeah.
behind him. That's
What I
where
would
it is.
call a cop out ending, like the book, where you go, well, this is a crazy person. You don't have to believe that any of this worked or is even happening. The movie could debatably end where he shot himself, and the rest is in his head. An ending I never really like. I'm going to believe what I'm seeing for the rest of the film.
Why the
but
fuck not?
But a direction you could definitely go with that. To backtrack and to get into some of the themes of this, I really, really enjoy. So we're going to move beyond base components of men fighting.
Beyond Jared Leto and all that he is.
Right. So if you can't get beyond men fighting and Brad Pitt without his shirt on, you should probably just turn the show off. But for the rest of us, for you people out there that I've been so desperate to talk to about the themes of Fight Club, they bring the buildings down, but to backtrack in much the same way that the movie did, this starts with a central theme of getting Edward Norton to hit rock bottom. And talk about, speaking to me personally, like, I live in that fucking place with IKEA furniture. I mean, like, look around here. It's IKEA furniture everywhere. Having built up this place for you and living a life that is mediocre, but not even really realizing it. You have this job and it pays your bills, and so you do it. You probably have aspirations, but maybe artistic ones. You're just not going to do them. You're going to live in that fucking spot. And every once in a while, you will get comfortable in your life taking up that position. I know you've never really had to work a bullshit job. So
Yeah, not too much.
You haven't woken up one day and been like, for a year, I've been at Circuit City. What am I doing? You know, that kind of thing. But people do that. Most people do that. And they have real beautiful things they want to do in their lives, but they get caught up paying their bills, and they live in a place with a bunch of furniture they bought because that's the kind of thing they do. And so Edward Norton's character creates Tyler Durden, obviously, as the film has hammered in, as a mechanism for him to burn his apartment to the ground, move to this bullshit house, this dilapidated place, basically live rent-free or close to it in this apartment, which I don't know if he ends up really owning it or not. Yeah, I'm sorry, this house. Again, thinking of my own life, but I do have these crazy cravings to just move out to the south side of Chicago where I can just live for free in an apartment. We were talking about this in a movie that we saw earlier, just
free loft housing.
Yeah.
It was The Crow.
Yeah, living, that idea of living rent-free in an apartment and just having nothing, and it's dirty and awful. Because once you hit rock bottom, you can only go up. Not really I think that's more an implied message of the film. Tyler would have you crush that down. He doesn't ever want to go up. In fact, Edward Norton's character, the narrator, is never really given a name. The few people I've ever managed to sit down for a second to talk about Fight Club will call him Jack, as in those awful things that he's reading out of Life magazine or whatever the fuck that is. But Jack starts to see Tyler's plan, and he goes, oh yeah, I'll burn myself down to the ground and build back up. Then I can only go up. And Tyler keeps telling him over and over through each phase of the plan, the goal is never to go back up. It's just to stay in this shit, this awful rock bottom place. And so Tyler begins to do all these things, and throughout the first and maybe even the second act of the film, this is still a personal thing for him. But as he creates Fight Club, and as Fight Club turns into Project Mayhem, which is another theme I'll get to that I really like, it becomes about doing this for the entire world. And that's where I think debatably it's not an okay thing. I really like the idea of bottoming out personally as a way to just figure out, get out of
Basically
mediocrity.
Detox.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is. It's mediocrity detox. But that's not okay when you start forcing it on other people. The point where they have decided to burn down buildings to reset the credit to zero, something has clearly gone wrong.
And they don't have any control anymore.
No, they don't. They don't. Well, and that's the other theme I really like, is that Tyler has started an organization. Jack has started an organization that became out of his hands because he's a fucking crazy person, really, because of the shit going on with his insomnia and these jumps he's making. And now he's given birth to this organization that doesn't even really listen to him because he's set these rules in place. So no matter where he goes or what he does, he's given this king's treatment, but the plan is already in motion and he can't do anything to stop that. And I almost wish there was a longer version or another way to stretch out that whole aspect, because it's something that I don't think is touched on often enough in storytelling, is creating something involving other people that's out of your hands. We've seen like the Frankenstein thing, where you create a monster and it's out of your hands. And I guess that's kind of a metaphor for what I'm talking about. Yeah. But you don't really see, all right, I've started an organization, a corporation, really. It's everything they hate. It's a franchised. Project Mayhem is a franchise corporation.
To take it to, again, I mean, Frankenstein, okay, so really quick, this is something I need to touch on because this is something I need to explain to our audience. When people go, this story has themes reminiscent of blah, 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 I don't care.
Right.
Unless it's Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So the thing about this film that is the most reminiscent about Frankenstein is when he comes down the stairs and he says the house is alive.
Yeah.
And he's not even a part of it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what happens is it turns into its own thing. And
Sure.
he says, he goes into the cop and he says, they're capable of carrying out these acts without central leadership.
Sure.
And it's grown to this mass thing that he was a seed to a forest.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. What's a shame when we talk about the Frankenstein myth is we often have in the show, we always get caught up in the religious aspect of it. Because I think that's what's most prevalent. People want to talk about how,
Man
science shouldn't
God,
whatever.
Dinosaur eats man.
Yes.
Women inherit the earth.
Yes, man shouldn't play God. But there is this much better thing to look at, which is maybe what I should just try and focus in anytime Frankenstein comes up, of creating something that is out of your hands and dealing with that psychologically and dealing with it physically, and how you come to terms personally with having created a monster, really, with having created something and trying to right that wrong and maybe not being able to. At the end of the film, the buildings still come down. The police are still in the Paper Street house. He's totally fucked. So although he's reset himself and although he's burned down his condo, he's in a position now where he's ruined the lives of maybe millions of people. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could go as far as you want with the credit companies, although everybody seems to love the idea of resetting the credit to zero. That has some long-reaching implications that would seriously fuck a lot of people. And that's another one of those things when you talk about it being base, people at the end go, yeah, credit card debt, don't have any more of that. And don't think about the real implications of that and how many people that reaches out to.
All right, we're running out of time here, so I'm going to have to put an end cap on your Fight Club fancy rantitude.
All right, are you gonging me? Is that what this is?
Yeah, I'm swinging it.
All right, so I got a couple more things, and I will hit these as fast as possible.
And then I'll hit the gong.
Jeff Cronenweth did a lot of the cinematography stuff. He's worked with David Fincher on a couple things. Son of the cinematographer David Fincher used for Alien 3.
Okay.
He set up a lot of these different shots and these visual aesthetics I really like. The stuff that gets me in David Fincher stuff, we talked a little bit about it in 7. So if you want to hear me ramble about camera stuff, go back to 7. But the minimalistic use of lighting, you notice this too. This is a very black movie. I mean, especially in the beginning. In the night stuff, they're using flashing, which is this contrast enhanced boost where you bring up the detail in the shadows without touching the highlights or the midtones. Allowed them to work at nighttime a lot. There's barely any scenes that are in the day. Really, the humorous scenes are in the day. The office stuff or riding the bicycle in places you're not supposed to. We have that silver retention stuff I talked about in Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, too, which if you didn't hear that was these really, really dense blacks. The movie had an additional kind of contrast boost used all over the place. These underexposed shots. A lot of black stuff, a lot of dark stuff, but it's mostly to further this ongoing feeling of the movie just being fucking dirty. I mean, it's when you see it on DVD, it's almost like seeing it in a cinema where the reel's fucked up. I mean, to the point where they make the joke about the cigarette burns. You want to feel like you have hit rock bottom. You want to feel like you're surrounded by dirt all the time and that it just gets fucking dirtier and dirtier. You see that in the set design, but I think you see that a lot in even stuff when they're doing the fights. It's all fluorescence. Stuff we saw in 7 where it's that sickly kind of green color. A lot of people don't use fluorescence in lighting when you light a movie because it makes everything look fucking disgusting and gross. But that's what you're going for here. And I think it's a bold choice and one that's really effective. When he's not doing that, he's doing the minimal overhead lighting that I really like. All this stuff where it's just like, fuck the white balance. Everything's going to look sick and dirty the entire time. You move over to the score, which is a lot of electronic stuff, but it's very industrial too. It's grinding, it's sounds of machines, it's the fucking sound of making soap, you know what I mean? The sound all over the movie is fantastic. It's some of my favorite Foley work ever.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to demo, like, Foley is sound effects, essentially, right? We've talked about that before, too. If you want to demo a sound system just for not even music or score, but just good, dirty Foley stuff, a couple of those first fights where you have the 5.1 mix of the crowd like screaming, brutally screaming, and then that meatpacking sound, that wonderful, gorgeous meatpacking sound. Every single punch, you really feel the blood splatter. It's just fantastic.
You're holding you're clenching a fist right now.
Yeah, you can't help it, but you just think back to those. If other sound designers could get away with it, they would just steal the meatpacking sounds from Fight Club and reuse them. In 10 years, I still haven't heard Foley get any better than every time a fist is swung in Fight Club. It's magnificent. when we're not in the basements, and that stuff is some of the most lit stuff, it's some of the warmer stuff. What I really like about the color usage is that the movie is really desaturated, but still has very bright color, like his shirts. He's always got that very iconic red jacket, or like these almost Hawaiian shirts.
Right.
Just leads to this dirty feeling where it somehow looks desaturated, Seven style, but it's still got bright colors that pop, and it leads to that overall feeling, that sickly feeling that something is wrong. It's not the way it's supposed to be.
Like you haven't been sleeping. That's kind of the vibe you get.
And although the movie's been criticized for its choreography because, the fights aren't big budget action, whatever, I think it has some of the best rhythm for playing out scenes. The scene especially where he's giving him the kiss, as it's called, with the lie, with the soap stuff. He's giving him the chemical burn. Just blow for blow, the sound that's used in that scene, I think that's a really interesting scene to deconstruct and go back and look at that if you're concerned with pacing and rhythm in a scene. We have to go. I also think it's interesting to go back and watch for all of the homosexual overtones in the film, which I believe are there to distract you from the fact that the two characters are the same. Because
Fun drinking game, because of how much time dudes spend masturbating.
Well, you spend all this time looking at these two guys, like that bathtub scene, and even I described it as the kiss, but I mean, obviously homosexual symbolism, and you're going, are these two guys lovers? And I think it's meant to distract you from going, are these two guys the same person? Which, how cool is that to blanket your twist with weird gay stuff? All right, that's it. I'm tapped. I got everything. I got everything out there.
Gone.
We have a website. It's doublefeatureshow.com, and an email address where you can contact us. That's doublefeatureshow@gmail.com. So you can get the show itself off iTunes and the often mocked Zune Marketplace. There's also this new thing. So it's called Stitcher. The website is stitcher.com, Stitcher. And it's an application solely for talk radio. So it's free. You can get it off the site, or it's on iPhone, Android, Palm, basically every platform known to man. And it's a ton of huge broadcasters. NPR, Air America, Fox, MSNBC, double feature now, apparently. And the thing that's actually awesome about it, so go on there, you can listen to our show, whatever, that's great. But the app itself is like Pandora. If you've ever used that, it basically lets you build a radio station out of, well, in this case, just a bunch of different podcast feeds. You can just put a ton of them in there, and then you can jump around from show to show without ever having to download any of the episodes. So it's great for finding new stuff. I've been playing around with it a ton. I love it. We also got a new donor this week. Frank donated this show. Because our studio looks like something out of the Great Depression, we have a 30s era traveling sideshow job for Frank. So at his own request, he's going to be the boss man. He is the one who will speak on behalf of the management. Because, as you may know, the management itself is far too busy to deal with the roustabouts and performers like ourselves. And for that, we now have Frank. So thanks a ton, Frank. We really mean that. I wasn't kidding about the Great Depression thing. I mean, we're out of the studio in, 2 weeks?
Yep.
So we're going to need a new home. And if ever you were planning to donate to the show, now is definitely the time to do that. You can do that by going to donate.doublefeatureshow.com. You click the one of the little shiny buttons there, your choice, and it will make this incredibly inconvenient, painstaking transition for us a lot easier. Donate.doublefeatureshow.com. So next time on the show, we have an explosive year-end final conclusion
Next time
thing.
is the year-end event where we're going to cover Russ Meyer's iconic Faster Pussycat Kill Kill.
Yes.
And then the iconic Lindsay Lohan smash Mean Girls.
I do want to clarify, we're going to do another year-end wrap-up thing like we did last year. Maybe we can talk about more of our feelings with Fight Club or Confessions of a Dangerous Mind.
Read emails.
We'll read some emails. Send us some more goddamn emails because that's the only time all year long we read emails on the show, which is great.
Watch more fucking film.
All right, bye.